Tom Mason couldn't believe his eyes that morning. There, in an old cage at the edge of his property, was a baby Mustang. Its coat was covered in mud, and its eyes were filled with fear. Tom had spent his whole life farming, making the safe choice, following the rules. But now, looking at this trapped wild horse, he knew he had to act. With shaking hands, he picked up his bolt cutters. One cut would free the horse, but it could also cost him everything: his farm, his savings, maybe even his freedom. He didn't know that Elena Rivers, the billionaire who owned the Mustang, was watching. She was known for being tough, unforgiving. No one had ever dared to touch her prized horses before. What could make a ruthless billionaire completely change her ways after watching a simple farmer rescue a horse? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Tom Mason's kitchen as he thumbed through the worn family photo album. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten beside a stack of unpaid bills. The album's pages told a story spanning 3 generations on this land. His grandfather clearing the fields, his father building the barn, and Tom himself learning to walk among the hay bales. He paused at a photograph of his late wife, Catherine, sitting atop their old mare, Daisy. Her smile still had the power to warm his heart and break it all at once. 5 years since she'd passed, and some mornings he still woke expecting to hear her humming in the kitchen. "Dad, you're going to be late for feed delivery." Sarah stood in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, work boots already dusty from morning chores. At 24, she was the spitting image of her mother, right down to the way she crossed her arms when worried about him. "Just remembering," Tom said, closing the album carefully. "Your mother loved mornings like this. She also loved keeping the farm running on schedule," Sarah reminded him, but her voice was gentle. She crossed the kitchen and picked up one of the bills, frowning at the red stamp across its front. Tom took it from her hand. "Nothing for you to worry about." "I do the books, Dad. I know exactly what there is to worry about." She wasn't wrong. The Mason family farm had never been wealthy, but they'd always managed to get by. Lately, though, getting by had become more challenging. The big agricultural companies were squeezing out smaller farms, and the drought last season had hit them hard. "We'll figure it out," Tom said, standing up. "We always do." The morning routine was as familiar as breathing. They moved through the barn in comfortable silence, checking on the animals, distributing feed. Their small herd of cattle needed moving to the south pasture, and the fence there needed mending. Always something to do on a farm. Tom watched Sarah expertly handle the horses in their modest stable. They only had 3 now, 2 working horses and an elderly pony they couldn't bear to part with. Catherine had been the real horse person in the family. She'd given riding lessons to supplement their income, taught Sarah everything she knew about horsemanship. "Remember when Mom used to rescue injured wild birds?" Sarah asked, brushing down their oldest mare. She'd nurse them, back to health in that old cage by the property line. Tom's hands stilled on the hay bale he was lifting. The cage. He hadn't thought about it in years. After Catherine died, he couldn't bear to look at it anymore, let alone use it. It had slowly rusted away at the edge of their property, a reminder of gentler times. "She always said everything deserved a chance to heal," he murmured. The morning light streamed through the barn windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. In the distance, the mountains rose blue and massive against the sky. This land was more than just fields and fences. It was the repository of 1,000 memories, the foundation of everything they'd built together. Sarah's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. "That's the feed supplier. They're saying they're raising prices again next month." Tom nodded, unsurprised but weary. "How bad?" 15%. She showed him the message, her expression grim. "Dad, we barely break even now." "We'll figure it out," he repeated, but the words felt hollow. They finished the morning chores in thoughtful silence. Tom couldn't help but notice how the fence posts needed replacing, how the barn roof was showing its age. Every repair they postponed was another debt to the future, another crack in the foundation of their way of life. The family photo album lay on the kitchen table where he'd left it, morning light catching its worn corners. 3 generations of Masons had faced their own challenges on this land. His father had weathered the farm crisis of the 1980s. His grandfather had survived the Dust Bowl. But times were different now. The world moved faster, demanded more. Small farms like theirs were becoming relics, romantic notions of a simpler time that the modern world had outgrown. Sarah appeared in the doorway again, keys in hand. "I'm heading to town for supplies. Need anything?" Tom shook his head, then paused. "Actually, grab some extra bandages and antiseptic if you can. Never know when an animal might need patching up." She smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "Just like Mom taught us." As Sarah's truck kicked up dust down the long driveway, Tom stood on the porch, looking out over his land. The morning was wearing on, sun climbing higher, burning off the last of the dew. Soon it would be time to check the irrigation systems, mend that fence, call about the feed prices. But for now, he let himself linger, remembering Catherine's voice, her love for this place and every creature on it. The world might be changing, but some things remained constant. The rhythm of the seasons, the call of duty, the quiet strength found in doing what needed to be done. The old Mason family photo album held more than just memories. It held a legacy of perseverance, of choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Tom knew he would face them the same way his family always had. One day at a time, with dignity and determination. He didn't know it yet, but the biggest challenge of his life was waiting in a rusty cage at the edge of his property. And when it came, it would test everything the Mason family stood for. The bolt cutters felt heavy in Tom's hands as he approached the cage. Dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, but his attention was fixed on the frightened foal before him. It was a beautiful creature, even covered in mud. Its breeding was evident in the proud arch of its neck, the intelligent gleam in its eyes. "Easy now," he murmured, keeping his voice low and steady. The Mustang pressed itself against the far corner of the cage, nostrils flaring. Its coat, what Tom could see of it beneath the dirt, showed hints of a rare silver dapple pattern. This was no ordinary wild horse. He set the bolt cutters down slowly and pulled out his phone, dialing a familiar number. 2 rings, then a groggy answer. "Doc Miller, sorry to wake you, but I need you out here." Quietly, the veterinarian's voice sharpened with interest. "What kind of emergency? Better you see for yourself." While waiting for the vet, Tom settled on the ground a few feet from the cage, deliberately making himself smaller, less threatening. He began talking softly, not really caring what he said, just letting the foal get used to his voice. "Your mom must be worried sick about you. Bet you didn't plan on spending your night in this old thing." "Catherine, that's my late wife. She used to keep injured birds in here, nurse them back to health. Never thought it'd hold something like you." The Mustang's ears flicked forward, tracking his voice. Ever so slightly, the tension in its posture eased. 20 minutes later, Doc Miller's truck pulled up, tires crunching quietly on the gravel. The vet was a weathered woman in her 60s who'd been caring for animals in the county longer than most people had been alive. She took one look at the foal and let out a low whistle. "Oh, Tom, that's a Rivers bloodline if I ever saw one. Worth more than your whole farm." "Figured as much." Tom stood slowly, joints creaking. "But we can't leave it here." Doc Miller studied the cage, then the horse, her experienced eye noting every detail. "No, we certainly can't. That front leg needs looking at and it's probably dehydrated, but, Tom, this could get complicated." "Already is." He picked up the bolt cutters again. "Question is, are you with me?" She sighed, but was already reaching for her medical bag. "Just like old times with Catherine, isn't it? Always finding something that needed saving." She pulled out a sedative. "Let me get a closer look at that leg first. Then we'll figure out how to do this without either of us getting kicked. The next hour was a careful dance of earning the foal's trust. Doc Miller managed to get close enough to check its vital signs and examine the leg without sedation, a minor miracle given the horse's fear. "Looks like superficial cuts and some bruising," she reported. "Nothing broken, thank goodness, but it needs cleaning and antibiotics. And that's just the start of what it needs." Tom nodded, watching the sun climb higher. Sarah would be back from town soon. Better get on with it then. The actual cutting of the lock took seconds. The gate swung open with a rusty groan that made the foal startle. But it didn't bolt. Whether too tired or too scared, it stayed pressed in its corner. "Easy," Tom soothed, taking a step back. "Nobody's going to hurt you." Doc Miller had prepared a makeshift halter from soft rope. "If we can get this on, we can guide it to your stable." "But Tom," she fixed him with a serious look, "this is technically theft. That marking on its flank, that's the Rivers brand. Elena Rivers doesn't mess around when it comes to her horses." "Neither do I," Tom said quietly. "Not when it comes to doing what's right." The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the pasture. In the distance, they could hear the regular sounds of the farm coming to life. Cattle lowing, chickens announcing the morning. And here, in this moment between night and day, between right and wrong, a decision had been made that would ripple out far beyond this quiet corner of the world. It took another 30 minutes of patient coaxing before the foal would accept the halter. When it finally did, Tom felt a surge of respect for the animal's courage. Despite its fear, despite its exhaustion, it still held its head high. They led it slowly toward the stable, Doc Miller checking its gait, while Tom maintained a gentle pressure on the lead rope. The morning light revealed more details of its coat. Beneath the mud and fierce sweat, the silver dapple pattern was even, more striking. "This isn't just any Rivers horse," Doc Miller mused as they walked. "This is from their premium breeding program. They've been trying to establish this color line for years." Tom absorbed this information silently. The more valuable the horse, the more trouble he was in. But watching the foal pick its way carefully across his pasture, trust slowly replacing terror in its eyes, he knew he wouldn't have done anything differently. Sarah's truck appeared on the driveway just as they reached the stable. She took one look at the situation and immediately started gathering clean blankets and water buckets, asking no questions. Just like her mother, she knew when action mattered more than words. As Doc Miller began cleaning the foal's wounds, Sarah touched her father's arm. "Dad, there's something else you should know." She held up her phone, showing him a social media post. Someone had filmed the rescue from the road, the whole thing from his first approach to the cutting of the lock. The post was already gaining traction, shares and comments multiplying by the minute. "Well," Tom said, watching Doc Miller gentle the frightened Mustang, "suppose there's no going back now." The morning sun streamed through the stable windows, catching dust motes and the silver in the foal's coat. Somewhere he knew this quiet morning was about to become very complicated. But for now, there was only this, the soft sounds of healing, the warmth of the sun, and the knowledge that whatever came next, he'd done what needed to be done. By noon, the video had gone viral. Bethany from the local diner had been the first to share it. Her 16-year-old daughter, Amy, had filmed it on her way to school. "Local farmer rescues trapped baby horse" was trending across 3 counties, and the comments section was alive with speculation. Sarah monitored the situation from the barn office, alternating between her laptop and phone. "It's not just local anymore, Dad. Some major animal rights accounts have picked it up." Tom barely heard her. He was focused on the foal, which had finally accepted some water and was nibbling cautiously at the hay they'd provided. Doc Miller had cleaned and dressed its wounds, administered antibiotics, and left detailed care instructions, along with a warning. "The moment Elena Rivers sees this, she'll come looking, and Tom, she's got lawyers who make more in a day than we see in a year." The office phones started ringing. First local news, then regional stations. Sarah fielded the calls while Tom stayed with the horse. By early afternoon, the first reporters appeared at the end of their long driveway, kept at bay only by the locked gate. "Mr. Mason," they called out, "can you comment on the rescue? Did you know it was a Rivers horse?" Their neighbor, old Joe Bradley, drove up in his pickup. He'd brought coffee and sandwiches, along with news from town. "Place is buzzing," he reported, handing Tom a coffee. "Betty at the feed store says she hasn't seen this much excitement since that tornado in '98. But Tom," he glanced at the reporters, "word is Rivers people are already asking questions." Tom nodded, accepting both the coffee and the warning. "How's the foal's feed supply?" he asked Sarah, deliberately changing the subject. "Doc Miller's bringing more specialized feed. She says its diet needs to be carefully managed after the stress." Sarah paused, checking her phone again. "Dad, there's something else. People are starting to donate. They've set up a legal defense fund." Tom looked up sharply. "What?" She turned her laptop to show him. A local activist had set up a crowdfunding page. "Help Farmer Mason fight for..." "What's right?" The total was already over $5,000. "I didn't ask for this," Tom said quietly. "No," Sarah agreed, "but people want to help. They're calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero, I'm just a farmer who did what needed doing," Joe finished. "We know. But Tom, folks are tired of the big companies pushing everyone around. Maybe this isn't just about a horse anymore." The afternoon wore on. More reporters arrived. The social media counts kept climbing. Someone had discovered Elena Rivers' history of aggressive business tactics, and a new narrative was emerging. David versus Goliath, the small farmer against the corporate giant. Sarah fielded another call, this one from the state's largest newspaper. "They want to know if we have a statement." Tom looked at the foal, now resting peacefully on clean straw. Its coat was clean, revealing the true beauty of its silver dapple. Pattern. In the sunlight streaming through the barn windows, it almost seemed to glow. "Tell them..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell them I did what anyone would do, seeing an animal in distress. Tell them that's all there is to say." But of course, that wasn't all there was to say. By evening, the first black SUV appeared at their gate. Men in suits stood examining the property through binoculars. The Rivers logo was clearly visible on their vehicle's door. "They're just trying to intimidate us," Sarah said, but her voice wavered slightly. Joe had stayed, along with a few other neighbors who'd dropped by throughout the day. They sat in lawn chairs near the barn, a quiet show of support. More kept arriving as the sun began to set, farmers, ranchers, townspeople. They parked along the road and brought food, thermoses of coffee, and firm handshakes. "You're not alone in this, Tom," Betty from the feed store said, dropping off a casserole. "Whatever's coming, we're with you." Tom watched the gathering crowd with mixed emotions. He hadn't wanted any of this, the attention, the conflict, the looming confrontation. He just wanted to help a frightened animal. But now, watching his community rally around him, he felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. The foal nickered softly from its stall, and Tom went to check on it. In the gathering dusk, its eyes were clearer, less haunted. It had begun to trust, to heal. Whatever came next would come, but for now, in this moment, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Sarah appeared in the barn doorway, her expression tense. "Dad, you should see this." She held out her phone. On the screen was a statement from Elena Rivers herself, released to the press just moments ago. "While we appreciate the public's concern, the unauthorized handling of valuable breeding stock is a serious matter. Rivers' equestrian empire will pursue all legal avenues to protect its interests." The warning was clear, but as Tom looked around, at his daughter's determined face, at the neighbors gathering in support, at the peaceful foal that had trusted him despite its fear, he felt strangely calm. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight they would do what farmers had always done: tend to their animals, watch over their land, and face whatever came with dignity and resolve. Elena Rivers stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan office, watching the city lights flicker to life in the gathering dusk. The Forbes magazine with her face on the cover lay open on her desk. Elena Rivers, the woman who built an empire on Wild Hearts. She touched the tablet in her hands, replaying the video of Tom Mason cutting through the lock. 20 million views now. Her PR team was having fits. "Miss Rivers?" Her assistant Marcus appeared in the doorway. "The board is waiting in the conference room." Elena nodded, still watching the video. There was something about the farmer's movements, careful, deliberate, gentle, despite his obvious strength. No hesitation, no showmanship, just quiet competence. "Tell me about him," she said. Marcus consulted his tablet. "Thomas Mason, 58, third-generation farmer, widowed 5 years ago. One daughter, Sarah, 24. The farm's been in his family since 1932. They're struggling financially, mortgaged to the hilt, barely breaking even. Small operation, but well-respected locally. And the horse? Silver Spirit's Promise. Value estimated at $1.2 million. Part of our experimental breeding program for rare color genetics. Disappeared during transport 3 days ago. We suspect the trailer door wasn't properly secured." Elena's jaw tightened. She'd warned them about using that transport company. The injury report? Minor lacerations, mild dehydration. The local vet, a Dr. Miller, treated it. She's well qualified, actually. Used to work with major breeding operations before choosing a rural practice. The conference room doors were visible through the glass walls of her office. Board members in expensive suits checked their watches, whispered to each other. They'd be expecting her to handle this the way she handled everything, swiftly, decisively, with the full force of corporate law behind her. The social media response. Marcus grimaced. Mixed. Our core customers understand the value of the bloodline, but the general public, they're romanticizing it. David versus Goliath narrative. Local hero stands up to corporate giant. Elena set down her tablet, finally turning from the window. "Show me the breeding program projections. Without Silver Spirit's Promise, we'd lose at least 2 years of progress. The silver dapple gene expression, in combination with our performance bloodlines, it's unique. Other breeders are already trying to replicate it." She picked up the Forbes magazine, studying her own face. On the cover, the photographer had captured her exactly as she'd wanted to be seen, powerful, untouchable, in control. The Ice Queen of equestrian sports, they called her. The woman who had transformed a modest family stable into a global empire. But they hadn't always called her that. She opened her desk drawer, removing a worn photograph. A young girl with wild dark hair sat atop a rangy Mustang, both of them covered in dust and glory. Her first horse, her first real love. Before boarding schools and business degrees, before hostile takeovers and corporate mergers. "Ms. Rivers, the board, is wondering why I haven't already dispatched the lawyers." She replaced the photograph carefully. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." Elena straightened her silk blazer, a custom piece that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her heels clicked against marble as she crossed to her private bathroom, checking her appearance. Perfect, as always. Not a hair out of place, not a hint of doubt allowed to show. But the doubt was there, wasn't it? Nagging at the edges of her carefully constructed world. She watched the video one more time. The way Tom Mason talked to the frightened foal, the gentle efficiency of his movements, the absolute certainty in his actions. "Marcus?" "Yes, Ms. Rivers." "Book the jet. I want to be there first thing tomorrow." He blinked in surprise. "You're going personally? But the Wellington show is this weekend and the Dubai contract can wait." She gathered her materials for the board meeting. "Sometimes you need to see things for yourself." "And the lawyers?" Elena paused at her office door. Through the glass, she could see the board members settling into their seats, preparing their arguments for aggressive action. They'd expect her to destroy Tom Mason, to make an example of him. It's what she would have done yesterday without hesitation. "Keep them on standby," she said finally. But no action until I've seen this farmer for myself. And what should I tell the board? Elena felt the weight of the empire she'd built, the expectations she'd created. The Ice Queen would never show weakness, never admit to doubt. The Ice Queen would crush this small-town farmer without a second thought. But watching that video, seeing the care in those weathered hands, she'd felt something she hadn't felt in years: recognition. "Tell them," she said, straightening her shoulders, "that River's equestrian empire didn't become what it is by being predictable." She strode into the conference room, the perfect picture of corporate power, but in her mind she saw dust and sunshine, felt the wild joy of a young girl on her first horse. Sometimes, she realized, you had to remember where you came from, to know where you should go. The board members rose as she entered, respect and wariness in equal measure on their faces. They knew her reputation. They expected blood. "Lady and gentlemen," she began, "we have a situation that requires a personal touch." The black SUVs arrived at dawn. 3 of them, gleaming and precise, rolled up to the Mason Farms gate like a funeral procession. Tom watched from the porch, coffee cup cooling in his hand. He'd been expecting this. "Legal notice of seizure," announced the lead attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as James Richardson. He held out a thick envelope through the gate's bars. "We're here to recover River's equestrian property." Tom took his time walking down to the gate. The morning was cool, dew still clinging to the grass. Behind him, Sarah stood in the doorway, phone in hand, recording everything, just as their hastily obtained lawyer had advised. "Might want to watch your step," Tom said mildly, taking the envelope. "Ground still soft from yesterday's rain." Richardson's Italian leather shoes were already gathering mud, his irritation barely concealed. 2 other lawyers flanked him, along with what appeared to be private security personnel. "This is a simple matter, Mr. Mason," Richardson continued. "That horse is worth more than this entire property. Return it now, and Ms. Rivers might be persuaded to show leniency." Tom opened the envelope, scanning its contents. The legal language was dense, threatening, absolute. Yet something caught his eye, a detail that seemed odd. "Says here you're authorized to recover a horse transported by Blue Ridge carriers." "That's correct." "Interesting." Tom folded the papers carefully. "Since the cage that horse was trapped. In Zitz on my property, and no Blue Ridge transport ever came through here." Richardson's jaw tightened. "The method of arrival is irrelevant. The horse bears the River's brand. And the injuries, the dehydration, those relevant?" "Mr. Mason." Richardson's voice carried the weight of countless courtroom victories. "You're interfering with a legitimate business operation. That horse represents years of careful breeding, millions in investment. This isn't some stray cat you can simply adopt." More vehicles were arriving now. Local news vans, supporters. From town, Betty from the feed store pulled up in her truck, deliberately parking so the Rivers vehicles couldn't easily leave. Other neighbors followed suit, creating an impromptu blockade. "Looks like we're going to be here a while," Tom observed. "Maybe we should all get comfortable." Richardson signaled to one of the security men, who spoke quietly into a radio. Moments later, a sleek helicopter appeared over the mountains, heading their way. Sarah hurried down to her father's side. "Dad, social media's exploding. Someone leaked that they're trying to seize the horse without addressing how it got hurt in the first place." "Mr. Mason," Richardson tried again, his composure cracking slightly, "you're making this much more difficult than necessary. We have the legal authority." "To what?" Tom's voice carried across the suddenly quiet scene. "To pretend none of this happened? To take that frightened animal and act like nobody's responsible for how it ended up in that cage?" The helicopter was getting closer, its rhythmic thumping growing louder. The crowd of supporters had grown, phones recording every moment. Richardson glanced nervously at the gathering witnesses. "Final warning," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "Surrender the horse, or face the consequences." Tom handed the legal notice back through the gate. "No," No. Richardson seemed genuinely startled. Mr. Mason, do you understand what you're risking? Everything you own isn't worth as much as doing what's right. Tom turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Richardson, your people might want to move those fancy SUVs. The morning milk truck gets here in about 10 minutes, and Curtis doesn't break for lawyers. The helicopter touched down in the adjacent field, sending dust and debris swirling. The door opened, and a familiar figure emerged. Elena Rivers herself, cutting through the morning air like a blade. Richardson's face went pale. This wasn't part of the plan. Tom watched her approach, noting the precision of her movement, the absolute authority in her bearing. Their eyes met through the gate's bars, the farmer and the billionaire neither willing to bend. The crowd fell silent. News cameras zoomed in. Sarah's hand found her father's arm, squeezing gently. Well, Tom said quietly, suppose now we find out what kind of person she really is. The morning sun broke through the clouds, catching the silver in Elena's hair, the steel in her eyes. Behind them all, in the distant barn, a silver dapple foal watched through its stall window, unknowingly, at the center of a storm about to break. Elena Rivers studied the old ranch ledger on Tom Mason's kitchen table, her manicured finger tracing the careful handwriting. Entries dating back decades told the story of the farm in numbers and notes. March 15th, 1965. Helped Widow Johnson with her hay, payment, Sunday dinner. She sat in the Mason farmhouse kitchen while her lawyers waited outside, the morning sun streaming through worn curtains. Tom stood by the counter making coffee the old-fashioned way. Sarah had reluctantly gone to tend to the animals, leaving them alone with their standoff. Your father kept interesting records, Elena said, turning a yellowed page. Most farmers just track debits and credits. Dad believed a ledger should tell the whole story. Tom set a mug of coffee before her, a simple ceramic piece chipped at the rim, including the things that don't have a price tag. Elena lifted the mug, noting the contrast between her perfectly polished nails and its worn surface. Everything has a price, Mr. Mason. Does it? He pulled out the chair across from her, its legs scraping against the linoleum. That why you flew out here yourself? To name a number? Through the window, they could see the crowd still gathering. News vans, supporters, curious onlookers. The morning had become a spectacle, but here in this kitchen, time seemed to move differently. Tell me about the horse, Elena said. You've got the vet's report. I want to hear it from you. Tom was quiet for a moment, considering. Found it at dawn. Scared, hurt, trapped in an old cage we used to use for rehabilitating wild birds. No sign of how it got there, no tracks from any transport vehicle. And you just happened to have bolt cutters handy? Keep them in the barn. Never know what needs fixing on a farm. He met her gaze steadily. But you know that, don't you? Behind that designer suit, you know exactly what farm life is like. Elena's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around the mug. You've been doing your research. Didn't have to. It's in how you move, how you look at things. You've mucked stalls before, Ms. Rivers. Probably still remember the smell of hay and leather in the morning. A muscle twitched in her jaw. She turned another page in the ledger, finding an entry from 1971. Loaned tractor to Edward's family. Their crop was failing. Payment none needed. Note, community matters more than currency. Your father was an idealist, she said. He was a realist. Knew the only way small farms survive is by helping each other. Tom leaned forward. Just like he knew that horse in my barn didn't fall off any transport. Somebody put it in that cage. Ms. Rivers. Somebody who knew it would be found. Elena set down the mug, studying him. That's a serious accusation. Not an accusation, just facts. Horse shows signs of being deliberately confined. No transport company involvement. And security cameras that just happened to be pointed the right way. He shook his head. Lot of coincidences. Outside, Sarah's voice carried through the window as she spoke to reporters. The crowd had grown larger, the story spreading faster than either of them had anticipated. Elena stood, moving to the window. The morning sun caught something metallic at her wrist. Not jewelry, Tom realized, but a worn watch that seemed out of place with her expensive outfit. "My father's," she said, noticing his look. "From when we had just 3 horses and a dream of something bigger." She touched the watch face gently. "He believed in doing things right, no matter the cost." "And what does Elena Rivers believe in?" She turned from the window, her expression complex. "I built an empire, Mr. Mason. Took a family stable and turned it into a global operation. Every decision, every acquisition, every tough call, it was all to honor his legacy." "Legacy?" Tom gestured to the ledger. "That word keeps coming up. But I wonder if we mean the same thing by it." Elena returned to the table, running her fingers over his father's careful handwriting. "When's the last time you updated this ledger?" "Mr. Mason." "Don't need to. QuickBooks handles the accounts now." He paused. "But every Sunday I write down the things that matter, just like Dad did." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression worried. "Dad? They're saying online that Rivers Equestrian is preparing an injunction. Something about immediate seizure." Elena's lawyers outside were on their phones, their gestures becoming more animated. The situation was spiraling beyond either of their control. "Interesting thing about legacies," Tom said quietly. "Sometimes protecting them means knowing when to change course." Elena looked down at the ledger one last time, at the decades of stories told in ink and paper. Then she reached for her own phone, her decision already forming. Elena stood in the Mason's barn, her Louboutin heels incongruous against the hay-strewn floor. The silver dapple foal watched her from its stall, ears pricked forward with curiosity rather than fear now. Tom had done good work with it in just these few days. She reached into her blazer pocket, touching her father's watch. The weight of it grounded her, as it always had in moments of decision. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Tom's voice came from behind her. "The way the light catches that coat." "Silver Spirit's Promise," Elena said softly. "That's its registered name. We spent years developing this bloodline." She turned to face him. "Do you know what it's worth?" "I know what it's valued at," Tom replied. "Not sure that's the same thing as worth." Through the barn doors, they could see Richardson pacing, phone to his ear. The board was demanding action. The press was waiting for statements. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath, watching this standoff between wealth and principle. "You were right," Elena said abruptly. "About the transport, about the cage." Tom waited, silent. "Someone in my organization arranged this. Probably thought they were doing me a favor, creating a publicity opportunity." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The ice queen of equestrian sports swoops in to rescue one of her precious horses from a small-time farmer. Great optics. Except it backfired. Because of you." She stepped closer to the stall. The foal stretched its neck, sniffing her cautiously. "Because you did what I would have done once upon a time, before spreadsheets and shareholders became more important than horses and heart." Sarah appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Ms. Rivers, your board is live on video conference. They're demanding to know your decision." Elena reached out, letting the foal catch her scent. Its nostrils flared, taking in this new person who smelled of expensive perfume and distant memories. Of hay and leather. "When I was a girl," she said more to the horse than to Tom, "my father had a saying. He'd tell me, 'Elena, sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is admit when you've lost your way.'" She unfastened the watch from her wrist, holding it up so it caught the light. The scratched face showed years of wear, the band worn smooth. By decades of work. Dad bought this watch the day he sold his first horse. Nothing fancy, just a working man's timepiece. But he wore it every day, through mucking stalls and making deals. She traced the worn edges, kept wearing it even after. "We could afford better." Said it reminded him of who we were, where we came from. Tom watched her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Your father's ledger," Elena continued. "It's not so different from this watch. Both of them telling us something about value, about Legacy. She turned to Sarah. Get your camera ready. I'm about to give your social media followers something to talk about. Sarah raised her phone as Elena stepped out of the barn into the morning light. The crowd fell silent, cameras turning to focus on her. Richardson hurried forward, legal papers in hand. Ms. Rivers, the injunction. She held up her hand, silencing him. Everyone was recording now, dozens of phones and cameras capturing this moment. My father built Rivers Equestrian on a simple principle, Elena began, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet farmyard. He believed that true horsemanship wasn't about ownership, it was about stewardship, about doing right by these magnificent animals that trust us with their care. She paused, looking back at the barn where Tom stood in the doorway, at the silver foal visible behind him. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I let Rivers Equestrian become about bloodlines and balance sheets instead of what really matters. She squared her shoulders. So let me be clear. Tom Mason did exactly what any true horseman would do. He saw an animal in distress, and he acted, regardless of brands or boundaries. Richardson stepped forward, his face pale. Ms. Rivers, the board can contact my office. She cut him off. I'll be making some changes there as well. She turned to address the cameras directly. Silver Spirit's promise will remain here, under Mr. Mason's care, while we conduct a full investigation into how it ended up in that cage. And Rivers Equestrian will be launching a new program, effective immediately, partnering with small farms and traditional horsemen to preserve the kind of values that my father, that all of our fathers, believed in. The crowd erupted in cheers. Phones buzzed with notifications as the story updated in real time. Through it all, Elena stood straight and tall, every inch the corporate leader, but somehow different now, more real, more human. She turned back to Tom, holding out her father's. Watch. Would you hold on to this for me? Just until I get things sorted out at corporate. It should be somewhere that remembers what it stands for. Tom took the watch carefully, understanding the weight of what she was really entrusting him with. Might need to get the crystal replaced, he said. Little worse for wear. Elena smiled, her first genuine smile in what felt like years. Aren't we all? The morning after Elena's announcement, the Mason farm was eerily quiet. The media circus had moved on, following Elena back to Manhattan, where she was scheduled to meet with her board. The hand-knitted blanket that had once belonged to Tom's. The wife now lay across Silver Spirit's promise's back, as Tom and Sarah worked with the foal in the round pen. Easy now, Tom murmured as the young horse tentatively followed his movements. That's it, nice and slow. Sarah leaned on the fence, watching. Mom would have loved this, she said softly. She always said the best horses choose their people, not the other way around. The foal's ears flicked forward at the sound of her voice. Its coat gleamed in the morning sun, the silver dapples almost luminescent. The injuries from the cage were healing well, leaving only faint marks that would soon fade completely. A sleek car approached down the drive, dust billowing behind. Not the media this time. Elena Rivers stepped out, dressed more casually than yesterday, in riding boots and jeans, though still managing to look elegantly put together. "How's our patient?" she called, approaching the round pen. Tom noticed. She carried a worn leather book under her arm, getting stronger. "Want to see?" Elena slipped through the fence rails with practiced ease. The foal regarded her with interest, picking up on Tom's relaxed demeanor. She moved slowly, positioning herself to create a triangle with Tom and the horse. "Your form is good," she observed. "Natural horsemanship. Catherine, my late wife, she studied with some of the best. Taught me everything I know." Tom gestured to the blanket. "That was hers. She used it for all our rescue cases." Elena touched the soft wool. "It holds memories." "And love?" Sarah added from the fence. "Mom always said horses could feel that." The foal chose that moment to stretch its neck toward Elena, nostrils flaring to catch her scent. She remained still, letting it make the choice to approach. The Board meeting was interesting, she said conversationally, eyes still on the horse. Several resignations, the ones who knew about the cage setup. Tom watched her body language, perfectly balanced, aware, present. Costly day for them. Costlier if they'd succeeded. She finally turned to look at him. I brought something. Thought you might be interested. The leather book turned out to be a training journal, decades old. My father's, Elena explained, carefully opening its pages. Every horse he ever worked with, every lesson he learned, including his notes on working with wild bloodlines. Sarah moved closer. Professional interest sparked. May I? The three of them sat on hay bales in the morning sun, the foal grazing nearby, as Elena shared her father's wisdom. His neat handwriting filled page after page with observations, techniques, insights gained through years of experience. See here? Elena pointed to a particular entry. He was working with Mustang lines back in the 70s, building trust, preserving their spirit while creating partnerships. This is what Rivers Equestrian was supposed to be about. Before it became about quarterly reports, Tom asked gently. Elena's fingers traced her father's writing. I thought I was protecting his legacy, building it into something bigger, more impressive. But reading this again, she shook her head. I lost sight of what really mattered to him. The foal wandered over, drawn by their quiet conversation. It lowered its head, breath warm against Elena's hand where it rested on the journal. They remember, Sarah said softly. Mom always said horses carry wisdom in their blood. They remember how it's supposed to be, even when we forget. Elena reached out slowly, letting the foal investigate her touch. Your mother sounds like she would have gotten along well with my father. She looked at Tom. I have a proposal for you. Not a corporate takeover, not a buyout. A real partnership. I'm listening. Rivers Equestrian has the resources, the connections, the breeding program. But somewhere along the way, we lost something essential, something you still have here. She gestured to the farm around them, to the quiet dignity of the old barn, to Catherine's blanket on the foal's back. Tom watched the young horse, seeing not just its monetary value now, but its potential as a bridge between two worlds. What exactly are you proposing? Elena's eyes lit up with the same passion that had once built an empire. A return to fundamentals. Using your methods, your understanding of natural horsemanship, we could create something new, a program that honors both tradition and innovation. Sarah joined in, catching the vision. A training center. Here, the first of many. Elena nodded. But this would be the heart of it, where we remember what it's really all about. The foal chose that moment to demonstrate its growing trust, stepping fully into their circle, allowing all three humans to touch it. Under Catherine's blanket, its muscles were relaxed, its eyes soft. Tom felt the weight of the moment, of possibilities opening up before them. He looked at Elena, not the corporate CEO now, but a horsewoman remembering her roots. Your father's journal, he said. Would you share more? Her smile was answer enough. Together they bent over the worn pages, three people and a young horse, building something new from the wisdom of the past. The first draft of the partnership agreement lay spread across the mason's kitchen table, surrounded by coffee cups and marked up with pencil notes. It was unlike any contract Elena had ever written or Tom had ever seen. So this section here, Sarah pointed to a paragraph, guarantees the farm stays in the Mason family. Complete operational autonomy, Elena confirmed. Rivers Equestrian provides capital, breeding stock, and marketing. You provide the expertise, the training philosophy, and the authentic environment, she smiled. No corporate suits telling you how to run your farm. Tom studied the document carefully. And the profit sharing? 50-50 on all training programs and breeding successes. Plus, we'll establish a foundation in Catherine's name for rescuing and rehabilitating horses. Elena turned a page. The corporate board nearly had a collective heart attack at these terms. But they agreed. They saw the social media numbers, the public response to our reconciliation. She gestured to her open laptop, where their story was still trending. Authenticity sells, it turns out. Who knew? Sarah's phone buzzed, another email from a potential client. Since the news had broken about the partnership, they'd been flooded with inquiries. Everyone wanted to be part of what the media was, calling the Mason Rivers Revolution. "We'll need help," Tom said, thinking practically. "Can't run an operation like this with just family. Already ahead of you." Elena pulled out another document. "I've been talking to Dr. Miller. She's interested in coming on board full-time, heading up our veterinary program. And I've got a list of other traditional horsemen who might be interested in teaching." The screen door creaked open as Joe Bradley, their neighbor, poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but you might want to see this." They followed him outside. A small group had gathered at the fence line, local farmers and ranchers. Some Tom had known all his life, others he only knew by reputation. "Word's getting around about what you're planning," Joe said. "These folks have proposals of their own." One by one they stepped forward. Mary Chen from the old Thompson place wanted to offer her pastures for grazing. The Rodriguez brothers had construction experience and ideas about updating the facilities while preserving their historic character. Even old Bill Jenkins, who hadn't left his property in years, had come to offer his expertise in traditional blacksmithing. "See," Elena murmured to Tom, "sometimes change brings out the best in people." Back inside, they returned to the agreement. Sarah had added another page of notes, ideas sparked by the community's offers of help. "We could create a whole network," she said excitedly. "Not just a training center, but a revival of traditional horsemanship, each farm contributing what they do best." Tom watched Elena's reaction carefully. This was expanding beyond their original concept, becoming something bigger. "It would mean adjusting the business model," Elena said thoughtfully. "More moving parts, more relationships to manage." She smiled. "My old self would have hated the complexity. But now I'm remembering how my father built his first stable, one relationship at a time, one handshake deal after another." She picked up her father's watch from where it rested near the agreement. "Maybe it's time Rivers Equestrian remembered its roots." The sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Silver Spirit's Promise in the paddock, running with a newfound joy. Its silver coat flashed in the sunlight, a living symbol of what was possible when old and new came together. "There's one more thing," Elena said, pulling out a final document. "I'd like to officially change the foal's registration." She slid the paper across to Tom. There, in formal typing, was a new name. Mason's Silver Promise. "A reminder," she said softly, "of promises kept and promises made." Tom felt the weight of what was happening, not just a business deal but a transformation, a chance to preserve what mattered while building something new. "Well," he said, picking up his pen, "suppose we'd better get started." As they bent over the agreement together, the future began to take shape. Not the corporate takeover many had feared, not the destruction of tradition, but a bridge between worlds, a promise, written in ink and trust, to remember what truly mattered while daring to grow into something more. The training journal grew thicker with each passing day. Tom and Elena had started keeping it together just as their fathers had done before them. Each entry documented not just Mason's Silver Promise's progress, but the growth of something larger than either of them had imagined. "Watch this," Sarah called from the round pen one morning, 2 weeks into their partnership. She stood quietly in the center while the silver foal moved around her, its movements increasingly confident. With a subtle shift of her body weight, she gave a nearly imperceptible cue. The young horse responded instantly, changing direction, with fluid grace. Elena, observing from the fence, shook her head in amazement. That level of responsiveness usually takes months to develop. "Mum's techniques," Sarah explained. "She always said it's not about control, it's about conversation." Tom made a note in the journal, his practical farmer's handwriting alongside Elena's more polished script. They'd begun combining their methods, discovering that corporate precision and farmhouse wisdom could create something greater than the sum of its parts. Speaking of conversations, Elena said, the first group of students arrives next week, 10 professionals wanting to learn traditional horsemanship. She watched Sarah work with the foal. They're paying premium rates for this authenticity. The word authenticity had become their touchstone. The old barn had been carefully updated. New safety features and modern amenities blended seamlessly with its historic character. Local craftsmen had done the work, their pride evident in every detail. Dr. Miller, now installed in the newly built veterinary facility, stuck her head out of her office. Elena, those lab results you wanted are in. The genetic markers are fascinating. They'd begun studying Mason's Silver Promise's unique traits, documenting how natural horsemanship methods influenced not just behavior, but physical development. The foal was becoming a bridge between scientific breeding and traditional wisdom. "Tom!" Elena called. "Come look at this!" He joined them in the vet's office, where Dr. Miller had pulled up detailed genetic charts. But Tom's attention was caught by something else, a framed photograph newly installed on the wall. It showed Catherine working with a rescue horse years ago, her face alight with the joy of connection. "Sarah gave it to me," Dr. Miller explained, following his gaze. "Said it should be here, reminding us what it's all about." Elena touched Tom's arm gently. "We could name the training program after her, the Catherine Mason method." "She'd like that," Tom said softly, though she'd probably say it was too fancy a name for simple truth. Through the window, they could see more changes taking shape. The Rodriguez brothers were putting the finishing touches on new paddocks, designed to allow horses to move naturally. In family groups, Mary Chen's connected pastures provided space for controlled grazing rotation. Bill Jenkins had set up his forge, the ring of his hammer marking the revival of traditional craftsmanship. The journal entry for that day read, "Promise showed exceptional response to natural pressure today. Sarah's refinement of Catherine's techniques proves the old ways still work. Elena's monitoring systems confirm decreased stress levels. Science. Meeting tradition. TM." Below it, Elena had added, "Watching Sarah work, I understand what Father meant about horse sense being passed down. Some knowledge can't be bought or taught in conventional ways. It must be lived." ER. As evening approached, they gathered in the old kitchen. Elena had begun joining them for dinner whenever she was on site. Her designer clothes now often dusted with hay, her corporate persona softening in the warmth of family meals. "The board's quarterly review came in," she mentioned, passing the mashed potatoes. "Our social media engagement is up 300%. Traditional horsemanship workshops are booked solid through next year." "And the horses?" Tom asked, knowing that was what really mattered. Elena smiled. "Healthier, calmer, and showing better performance metrics than ever. Turns out doing right by them is good business too." Sarah brought out Catherine's old recipe box, selecting their family's apple pie recipe. As she worked, she hummed the same tune her mother used to sing in this kitchen. Some things hadn't changed, and never would. Outside, Mason's Silver Promise, and called from its paddock, its voice strong and clear in the gathering dusk. The sound carried across the fields where modern monitoring systems stood alongside ancient wooden fence posts, where tradition and progress had found a way to coexist. Tom made one final note in the journal before closing it for the night. "Catherine always said horses remember." Today, watching Promise work, seeing Elena's face as she learned to trust the old ways, feeling this farm come alive with new purpose, I think we're all remembering something important. Some truths run deeper than business plans or breeding programs. They run in the blood, in the land, in the quiet moments when we let go of what we think we know and listen to what the horses have always been trying to tell us. TM. The headline in the Wall Street Journal hit like a thunderbolt. Rivers Equestrian Board questions. Rustic revolution strategy. Share prices drop amid concerns over traditional methods. Elena stood in the Mason's office, her phone buzzing, constantly with messages from concerned investors. The morning paper was spread across the desk, its bold letters seeming to mock their progress. "Friedman," she said, naming one of her former board members. He's behind this, trying to spook the shareholders. Tom read the article carefully. Says here our methods are unreliable and impossible to scale, that we're sacrificing proven business models for, what did they call it? Folksy farming philosophies, Sarah quoted, scrolling through online reactions. But Dad, look at the comments. Our supporters are fighting back. Indeed, social media was ablaze with testimonials from their first round of students. Videos of Mason's Silver Promises progress had gone viral again, showcasing the remarkable results of their combined approach. The numbers don't lie, Elena said, pulling up their quarterly reports. Training success rates up 40%. Horse health. Metrics improved across the board. Client satisfaction at record levels. But markets ran on perception as much as reality. By midday, River's equestrian stock had dropped 15%. Elena's phone rang. Marcus, her assistant in New York. They're calling for an emergency board meeting, she reported after hanging up. Some of the major shareholders are nervous. They're used to our old methods, our old margins. Margins, built on shortcuts, Tom observed quietly. Yes. Elena's admission was frank. Push them harder, train them faster, sell them sooner. It worked, on paper at least. She looked out the window where Sarah was working with their newest rescue, a former racing thoroughbred, learning to trust again. But at what cost? The office door opened and Dr. Miller hurried in, tablet in hand. You need to see this. I've been compiling data on our rehabilitation cases. She pulled up charts showing stress indicators, recovery rates, and long-term success metrics. The evidence was clear. Their combined approach wasn't just more humane, it was more effective. Science supporting tradition, Elena murmured. If only the shareholders could see... She stopped mid-sentence, an idea forming. Tom, what if we show them? Show them. All of it. The real work, the real results, not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but... She gestured to the window where Sarah continued working, her movements subtle, the horse responding with increasing confidence. Tom understood immediately. Bring them here. Not just the board, Elena continued, warming to the idea. Every major shareholder, every industry doubter. Let them see what we're building. Let them meet the people involved. Sarah had joined them, bringing the scent of hay and horses with her. We could make it an event, showcase the local craftsmen, the traditional methods. Let them experience the difference themselves. Dr. Miller was already scrolling through her data. I can present our research. The scientific validation of these methods would be hard to dismiss. 2 weeks, Elena decided. That's all we need. Time enough to prepare, soon enough to counter this publicity hit. She turned to Tom. But it has to be real. No corporate. Showmanship. No staged demonstrations. Real is all we know how to be, he replied. As if to emphasize the point, Mason's Silver Promise called from the paddock, its voice strong and free. Other horses answered. The rescued thoroughbred. The therapy horses, the carefully bred show prospects, each one a testament to their vision of combining the best of old and new. Tom picked up the newspaper, reading the criticism again. You know they'll come looking for flaws, trying to prove themselves right. Let them look, Elena said with quiet confidence. Some things prove themselves. Sarah's phone buzzed with another news alert. More industry figures were weighing in, questioning the wisdom of Rivers Equestrian's new direction. The pressure was mounting. But watching their horses move freely in the paddocks, seeing the results of their work in every restored spirit and healed heart, they knew they were building something worth fighting for. The challenge wasn't just to their methods. It was to the very idea that business and compassion could coexist, that progress didn't have to mean losing touch with fundamental truths. Elena straightened her shoulders, every inch the corporate leader, but with a new kind of strength now. Well, she said, seems we have some planning to do. Outside, the morning sun caught the silver in Promise's coat, making it shine like hope itself. The blueprint for their new training facility covered the entire kitchen table, But this wasn't a typical corporate architectural plan. Alongside the technical drawings were notes in multiple hands, Tom's practical observations, Elena's strategic additions, Sarah's innovative suggestions, and Dr. Miller's medical requirements. "See how the paddocks flow?" Sarah traced the design with her finger. "Traditional circular patterns, but with modern monitoring systems built into the fence posts. Horses move naturally, but we track everything." Elena nodded, adding another note. "The shareholders need measurable results. This gives us both natural behavior and hard data." They'd been working for days, preparing for the upcoming shareholder demonstration. Every aspect of their operation needed to show how old wisdom and new technology could work together. Bill Jenkins, the blacksmith, entered with his own contribution, a newly forged bit, crafted using traditional methods but incorporating modern pressure sensors. "Measures exactly how much contact the rider uses," he explained, setting it on the table. "Proves that lighter hands get better results." Dr. Miller picked it up, examining the craftsmanship. "Perfect for the research we're doing on stress responses. Traditional feel with scientific validation." The door opened again as Joe Bradley arrived with Mary Chen and the Rodriguez brothers. The community had rallied around them, everyone contributing. Ideas for proving their methods weren't just folksy philosophy, but practical innovation. "Got the old training records," Joe announced, setting down a dusty box. "Every horse worked here since 1965. Mary's been helping digitize them." Mary, a former data analyst before taking over her family farm, opened her laptop. "I've been cross-referencing the historical success rates with modern performance metrics. The patterns are fascinating." The Rodriguez brothers spread out their own plans, designs for updating the historic barn while preserving its essential character. Solar panels that looked like traditional roofing, climate control systems hidden in original woodwork. "Connection to nature doesn't mean rejecting progress," Ramon Rodriguez explained. "It means making progress serve the greater good." Tom watched them all work, these people who'd become more than neighbors or business partners. They were pioneers, of a sort, bridging worlds that had grown too far apart. Outside, Mason's silver promise demonstrated their philosophy in motion. The young horse moved with natural grace through their prototype paddock, sensors recording every step while allowing complete freedom of movement. Traditional horsemanship meeting modern analysis. Elena's phone buzzed. Another message from New York. "Board members confirmed for next week. 15 of them, plus major shareholders." She looked up at the group. "This is our chance to show them what's possible." Sarah pulled up their latest training videos on her tablet. They'd documented everything, creating a library of proof that their methods worked. Every success, every breakthrough, every moment of connection between human and horse, all recorded and analyzed. "Look at these stress hormone levels." Dr. Miller pointed to a chart. "Dramatically lower than with conventional training methods, and the performance metrics are actually higher." The afternoon sun slanted through the windows as they refined their presentation. This wasn't just about saving their program anymore. It was about changing how the entire industry thought about horse training. "Remember what Catherine used to say?" Tom asked quietly. "That horses haven't forgotten how to teach us, we've just forgotten how to listen." Elena added that quote to their presentation notes. "That's what we need to show them. That listening to tradition doesn't mean rejecting progress. It means building something better." The blueprint before them was more than a facility design. It was a bridge between worlds. Every detail showed how respect for the old ways could enhance modern methods, how scientific understanding could validate traditional wisdom. As evening approached, they gathered on the porch, watching their horses graze peacefully. The setting sun painted everything in gold, from the ancient barn to the new solar arrays, from the traditional round pens to the modern monitoring stations. "You know," Elena said, "when I first came here I thought I was protecting my father's legacy by fighting change." She smiled. "Turns out sometimes protecting a legacy means helping it grow." The blueprint on the table had become something remarkable, a visual representation of their shared vision. Innovation rooted in tradition, progress guided by wisdom, science serving nature rather than trying to control it. They had 1 week to prove it could work, 1 week to show that the future of horsemanship didn't have to sacrifice its soul for success, 1 week to demonstrate that some revolutions don't destroy tradition, they help it evolve. The storm warnings came just 24 hours before the shareholders were due to arrive. Tom studied the weather radar on Sarah's laptop, his expression grim. Red and purple masses swirled across the screen, heading straight for the farm. "They're saying it could be the worst system in a decade," Sarah reported, refreshing the forecast. Flash flood warnings, high winds, possible tornado activity. Elena paced the kitchen, phone to her ear. "No, we can't postpone. The shareholders have already flown in. Some from overseas." She paused, listening. "Yes, I understand the liability concerns, but—" A crack of thunder interrupted her, making the windows rattle. Outside, the horses nickered nervously in their stalls. They'd brought them all in early, sensing the approaching storm. "We've got bigger problems," Dr. Miller said, hurrying in from her rounds. "The creek's rising, fast. If it breaches the banks, the lower pastures flood," Tom finished. "And the old barn." They all knew what that meant. The historic barn, though lovingly maintained, had never faced a storm of this magnitude. And now it held not just their horses, but their entire future. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by bone-shaking thunder. The power flickered once, twice, then died. "Generators kicking in," Sarah reported, but her voice was tense. Their new monitoring systems were running on backup power, sending alerts to her tablet. "Water's rising at 2 inches per hour." Elena ended her call, face set with determination. "The shareholders are still coming. Marcus is leading them up from the city." She met Tom's eyes. "We have to save both, the horses and the program." Rain began hammering the roof as they formulated their plan. The Rodriguez brothers arrived, drenched but ready to work, bringing sandbags and extra hands. Mary Chen and Joe Bradley weren't far behind. "Like the flood of '85, Joe said, helping Tom secure the barn doors. Community came together then too. Inside the barn, Mason's silver promise was agitated, picking up on the tension. The young horse's silver coat seemed to glow in the emergency lighting, its movements expressing what they all felt. The desperate need to act, to protect, to survive. "The creek's breached!" Sarah's voice carried over the storm's roar. "North, sides flooding." They worked through the night, a desperate race against nature. The old barn creaked and groaned, but held firm, protected by generations of careful maintenance and the Rodriguez brothers' recent reinforcements. Dawn brought a temporary lull and their first view of the damage. Fields underwater, fences down, roads barely passable, and in the distance a line of black SUVs approaching. "They're early," Elena said, wiping rain from her face. She looked down at her mud-covered clothes, so far from her usual corporate polish. "Not exactly the presentation we planned." Tom watched as Mason's silver promise moved cautiously in its stall, ears pricked toward the approaching vehicles. Despite the chaos, the horse remained calm, trusting in the humans who had earned its confidence. "Maybe," he said slowly, "this is exactly the presentation they need to see." Understanding dawned in Elena's eyes. "Not a polished show, but real horsemanship in action," Sarah finished. "Dealing with crisis, protecting the animals, working together." The SUVs pulled up just as the second wave of the storm hit. Shareholders in expensive suits stepped out into the wind and rain, looking appalled at the conditions. Among them, Elena recognized Friedman, the former board member who had criticized their methods. "Ms. Rivers," he called over the storm's roar, "surely you don't expect us to—" A massive crack split the air. One of the old oak trees, weakened by the flooding, began to lean toward the barn's roof. Without hesitation, everyone moved. Tom And the Rodriguez brothers with ropes and chains. Dr. Miller evacuating the nearest stalls. Sarah and Elena guiding horses to safety. The shareholders watched, slack-jawed, as their CEO waded through mud to help lead frightened horses. "Well," Elena called to them, rain streaming down her face, "are you here to observe or to help?" It was Friedman who moved first, shocking everyone by rolling up his silk sleeves and stepping into the mud. Others followed, designer suits forgotten as they joined the effort to save not just valuable horses, but a piece of living history. As the storm raged around them, something shifted. Corporate masks fell away, replaced by raw humanity. These weren't just assets to be managed. They were living creatures depending on human wisdom, courage, and compassion. Through it all, Mason's silver promise remained a beacon of their success. The young horse's calm demeanor under stress, its willingness to trust and cooperate, demonstrated everything they had been trying to prove about their methods. The storm had destroyed their carefully planned presentation, but perhaps, Tom realized as he watched shareholders and farmers working side by side, it had given them something far more valuable. The chance to show that true horsemanship isn't about perfect conditions or corporate strategies. It's about facing whatever comes with courage, wisdom, and unwavering dedication to doing what's right. The storm's aftermath brought a strange quiet to the Mason farm. Dawn revealed mud-covered fields, scattered debris, and something else. A photograph, blown loose from Elena's portfolio during the chaos. Tom found it while checking fence lines, protected from the rain by its plastic sleeve. The image showed a young girl on a rangy Mustang, both of them covered in dust and triumph. On the back, in faded ink, Elena's first rescue, 1985. Sometimes the wild ones teach us the most. He found Elena in the barn, helping Dr. Miller check on the horses. She traded her mud-soaked designer clothes for borrowed jeans and one of Sarah's old flannel shirts. In that moment, she looked more like the girl in the photograph than the corporate CEO she'd become. "Found something of yours," he said, holding out the photo. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she took it. "I'd forgotten I had this with me." She traced the image with a finger. "That's Thunder, my first real horse. Not a show prospect or a breeding investment, just a scared Mustang nobody else wanted." The shareholders were gathering in the makeshift office they'd set up in the house, waiting for damage reports and next steps. But for now, this moment felt more important. "What happened to him?" Tom asked quietly. "She," Elena corrected. "Thunder was a mare, and she taught me everything I needed to know about real horsemanship. Dad understood. He let me spend a whole summer just sitting in her paddock, learning to speak her language." Mason's silver promise nickered softly from its stall, drawing their attention. The young horse's coat was dusty from the storm, but its eyes were bright and interested. "Promise looks just like her," Elena continued. "Same way of moving, same careful way of watching. When I saw your video that first day, saw how you approached the cage." She shook her head. "It was like seeing myself, back when I still remembered what mattered most." Sarah appeared in the barn doorway. "Dad, the shareholders are asking for both of you." They found the group in the kitchen, looking oddly human in their mud-stained expensive clothes. Friedman stood by the window, studying the old family photographs. "On the wall, Miss Rivers," he began, then corrected himself. "Elena, we've been talking." The other shareholders nodded, their faces showing something new, understanding, perhaps even respect. "Last night," Friedman continued, "we saw something we didn't expect, not just crisis management, but—" He gestured helplessly. "Soul," offered an elderly board member. "We saw the soul of what Rivers Equestrian was always meant to be." Elena took out the photograph, passing it around. "This is how it started, not with business plans or profit margins, but with understanding what horses can teach us if we're willing to learn." The photo made its way around the room, each person studying it quietly. When it reached Friedman, he looked at it for a long time. "I knew your father," he said finally. In the early days, before the company grew so big, he used to say something about horses being mirrors. They reflect back what we bring to them, Elena finished. Trust for trust, fear for fear, respect for respect. Tom watched the corporate titans in his kitchen, seeing them transformed by mud and crisis and memory. These weren't just shareholders anymore. They were people rediscovering something they'd forgotten. The profit projections you showed us, Friedman said, about the traditional methods being more efficient in the long run. We didn't believe them because we were looking at the wrong metrics. You were measuring speed, Tom said, when you should have been measuring foundation. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time since the storm began. Its light caught the moisture in the air, creating a rainbow that arched over the farm. Sarah, who had been quietly documenting everything, spoke up. "Come see something." She led them to the barn, where Mason's silver promise was demonstrating exactly what they'd been discussing. The young horse moved with natural grace, responding to the subtlest cues from Dr. Miller, showing none of the stress such a severe storm would normally cause. "This is what trust looks like," Elena said softly. "This is what Dad was trying to build before we lost our way in spreadsheets and stock prices." The shareholders watched in silence as the silver horse demonstrated the perfect union of natural wisdom and careful training. No force, no fear, just willing partnership between species. "We'd like to revise our position," Friedman announced. "Not just support this program, but expand it. Make it the cornerstone of Rivers Equestrian's future." Elena looked at Tom, tears threatening in her eyes. "We're not just saving my father's legacy," she realized. "We're helping it become what it was always meant to be." The morning light streamed through the barn windows, catching the silver in Promise's coat and the hope in human eyes. Sometimes, Tom thought, it takes a storm to clear the air, to help everyone see what was there all along. The new sign went up exactly 1 month after the storm. Mason and Rivers Equestrian Heritage Center. Tom stood back, watching the morning sun catch the hand-carved letters. The Rodriguez brothers had outdone themselves, combining modern materials with traditional craftsmanship to create something timeless. "What do you think?" Elena asked, joining him. "Catherine would have loved it," he replied, "especially the heritage part." The farm had transformed, but carefully, thoughtfully. The old barn stood proud with its subtle upgrades, while new structures blended seamlessly into the landscape. Every addition respected the land's history while embracing its future. Sarah emerged from the training ring, leading Mason's silver promise. The young horse had become their living example of what was possible when old wisdom met new understanding. Corporate executives and traditional horsemen alike came to study its progress, each finding something valuable in its story. "The first teaching clinic starts today," Sarah reminded them. "We're full up, 20 students from 3 countries. They watched as trucks and cars began arriving, carrying a mix of professional trainers and corporate stakeholders. Each would spend the next week living the principles that had saved their program. "Remember the protocol," Dr. Miller called to her staff. "Full documentation of every session. We're building more than a training program. We're creating a new standard." The transformation went beyond the physical structures. Local farmers and artisans had become regular contributors, sharing generations of knowledge. Mary Chen's data analysis proved the effectiveness of traditional methods. Bill Jenkins taught the dying art of custom bit fitting, alongside modern pressure mapping technology. Elena's phone buzzed. Another corporate update. "Stocks hit a new high," she reported. "Turns out authenticity isn't just good horsemanship, it's good business." Inside the main office, their wall of memories had grown. Photos of the storm rescue now hung alongside historical images, telling a story of evolution rather than revolution. The infamous cage that had started it all had been preserved and mounted as a reminder, its rusty bars representing both crisis and opportunity. "Ms. Rivers," a young intern approached nervously. "The film crew is ready for your interview." They'd agreed to document their methods, creating a series that would share their approach with a global audience. Not just the techniques, but the philosophy behind them. "Tell them I'll be there shortly," Elena said. She turned to Tom. "Any advice?" "For the interview?" He smiled. "Just tell them what your father taught you, what thunder showed you, what promise proves every day, that sometimes the old ways are the best ways, especially when they help us find new ones." The morning's activities began to unfold. In one ring, Sarah demonstrated natural horsemanship techniques, while sensors gathered data on horse and handler stress levels. In another, Bill Jenkins showed how traditional blacksmithing could inform modern orthopedic care. Dr. Miller led a group through the rehabilitation facility, where rescued horses healed alongside premium breeding stock, each contributing to their understanding of equine psychology. The barriers between different worlds were dissolving, replaced by a shared commitment to doing what was right for the horses. "Tom!" Elena called from the office doorway. "Would you join me for the interview? They should hear both sides of the story." He followed her to where the film crew had set up, noticing how naturally she moved through the barn now, how comfortable she seemed in this environment that bridged her past and present. Mason's Silver Promise watched from its paddock as they sat before the cameras. The young horse had grown into its potential, just as their program had grown into its promise. Its silver coat still caught the light, like hope made visible. "Ready?" the interviewer asked. Elena reached for her father's watch, now restored and running smoothly. Tom thought of Catherine's blanket, still used in their rehabilitation work. Some things weren't meant to be replaced, just renewed, respected, allowed to evolve. "Tell us how it began," the interviewer prompted. They looked at each other, sharing a moment of understanding. The story wasn't just about a horse in a cage, or a farm in crisis. It was about remembering what mattered, about finding ways to preserve wisdom while embracing progress. "It began," they said together, "with a choice between what was easy and what was right." And as they shared their story, the Heritage Center hummed with activity around them, a living testament to the power of choosing right, of honoring the past while building the future, of letting horses teach us how to be better humans. Mrs. Henderson wiped tears from her eyes. "We thought, with all the big corporate farms, the changing industry, we thought places like ours were finished." "That's what they told us, too." Tom smiled. "Sometimes the old ways just need new allies." They spent the afternoon walking the Hendersons through their operation, not just the fancy new facilities or the technical innovations, but the small, vital details, how they'd preserved the old barn's character while upgrading its function, how they combined traditional horsemanship with modern monitoring, how they maintained the soul of a family farm while competing in a corporate world. "The best part," Sarah told them, "once you join the network, you're not alone anymore. Every farm brings its own wisdom, its own traditions. We all learn from each other." As the sun began to set, they gathered in the old kitchen, the one place they'd kept almost completely unchanged. Elena poured coffee into Catherine's old mugs, while Tom shared stories of their early struggles and triumphs. The Hendersons looked around at the photos covering the walls, images of horses and humans learning together, of old wisdom lighting new paths, of a community discovering that the future didn't have to mean forgetting the past. "So," Elena said, finally, "shall we talk about how to save your farm?" Outside, Promise's distinctive nicker carried on the evening air. One voice among many now, but still special, still reminding them of where this all began and showing them where it could lead. 1 year to the day after Tom Mason cut the lock on a rusty cage, a bronze statue was unveiled at the entrance to the Mason and Rivers Equestrian Heritage Center. The sculpture captured a moment frozen in time, a silver dapple horse in mid-stride, its head held high, its spirit unbroken. The morning sun caught both the bronze and the real Mason's Silver Promise grazing nearby, making it hard to tell which gleamed more brightly. The young horse had grown into its name, carrying the promise of their vision into reality. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," Sarah said, standing between Tom and Elena as they watched visitors gather for the anniversary celebration. The farm had become something none of them could have imagined that dawn morning. The historic barn still stood proud, now anchoring a network of thoughtfully designed facilities. Traditional round pens shared space with modern training areas. Old wisdom and new knowledge flowed together as naturally as the streams through their pastures. Elena touched her father's watch, now keeping time on Tom's wrist. Dad would have loved this, all of it. Catherine, too, Tom added softly. The blanket she had knitted still warmed nervous horses in their rehabilitation program, its threads wearing thin but its purpose stronger than ever. They watched as their first graduating class of trainers arrived, 20 people from around the world who had spent the past months learning their methods. Behind them came farmers, corporate leaders, and community members, all part of the web of relationships they'd built. Dr. Miller hurried up, tablet in hand as usual. Latest research paper was accepted. The Journal of Equine Veterinary Science wants to feature our stress reduction findings. The Rodriguez brothers were giving tours of the restored barn, proudly showing how they'd preserved its heart while helping it grow stronger. Mary Chen demonstrated their data integration systems, proving how traditional methods could be validated by modern metrics. Bill Jenkins had an audience around his forge, young apprentices learning the ancient art of reading a horse's needs through its hooves. His handcrafted bits were now in demand worldwide, each one a perfect blend of traditional craft and modern understanding. Mason's silver promise moved to the fence line, drawing everyone's attention. The horse's presence still commanded respect, but now with the quiet confidence of one who had found its place in the world. "Remember that morning?" Tom asked Elena. "When you first came here, ready for war?" She laughed softly. "I thought I was protecting an empire. Turned out I was finding its soul again." Sarah checked her phone. "Live streams starting. We've got viewers from 42 countries." They gathered near the statue for the ceremony. The crowd included faces from every chapter of their story. The neighbors who had stood by them during the storm, the shareholders who had learned to see value beyond balance sheets, the students eager to carry their methods into the future. Friedman, now one of their strongest supporters, stepped forward to speak. "A year ago, I thought tradition was the enemy of progress. Thanks to what's been built here, I understand that real progress means knowing what to preserve, what to adapt, and what to pass on." Elena took her turn at the microphone, her corporate polish now warmed by authentic connection. "My father used to say that every horse has a lesson to teach us, if we're willing to learn. This place, these people, and one very special silver horse taught me the most important lesson of all, that success isn't about changing who you are, but about becoming more truly yourself." Tom stood quietly, watching it all. The statue caught the essence of that moment when he'd first approached the cage. Not just a rescue, but a choice between what was easy and what was right. That choice had rippled out beyond anything he could have imagined, touching lives and saving more than just one farm. Promise nickered softly from the paddock, and other horses answered. Rescue animals healing alongside champion bloodlines, each one teaching and learning in their own way. The sound carried across the fields, where traditional wisdom and modern innovation had found common ground. Sarah slipped her hand into her father's arm. "Mom would be proud," she whispered. "Of all of it." Elena joined them, no longer the ice queen, but a true partner in something greater than corporate success. Together, they watched their graduates demonstrate their methods, each adding their own understanding to the foundation they'd built. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the bronze statue that would welcome future generations to this place where old and new, tradition and progress, heart and mind had found their balance. One horse in a cage had started it all, but the story had grown beyond any single moment or decision. It had become about remembering what matters, about choices and changes, about finding ways to preserve wisdom while embracing growth. About horses teaching humans how to be better and humans learning to listen. Mason's silver promise stood at the fence, head high, watching over it all. A living symbol of what can happen when trust replaces fear, when understanding guides change, and when people dare to choose what's right over what's easy. The legacy they'd built would continue to grow, changing lives both human and equine, proving that some revolutions don't destroy the past, they help it find its future.